I hit record in my Charlotte penthouse, still in my work shirt, and said straight into the camera, "My name's Bram, I'm 29, and this is a story about one empty chair, a manila envelope, and how I stopped being my family's walking ATM. It started back in Ridgemont, Georgia, beige ranch house on Hanson Lane. If you stood in the kitchen and looked at the fridge, you'd think one kid lived there, my sister, Raina. Pageants, dance team, local paper articles. Glossy smiles from age 5 to 25, top to bottom. Me? I was the quiet kid with a grocery badge and a bike that squeaked. I worked overnights at the all-night food house, just so I wouldn't have to ask for gas money. When I got my full academic scholarship to Midland State, I ran inside waving the letter like it was a lottery check. Mom, Marla, was scrolling her phone at the counter. She barely glanced up. "Call Raina, dinner's ready," she said. Quick note. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. A week later, I pinned my honor roll certificate on the fridge next to Raina's latest homecoming photo. Next morning, I found it in the recycling bin under a crushed cereal box. Not even wrinkled, just tossed. Dad, Dale, came home every night from the garage smelling like oil and stress. He'd kiss Mom's cheek, say, "Hey kid," and fade into the background. Every time Mom brushed off my wins as just grades, he stayed quiet, never pushed back. Graduation day, Midland State. I walked that stage in a rented Navy gown. I'd saved 2 seats for them, row 3, seats 7 and 8. I looked up from the stage and saw them empty. Only text I got from Mom that day said, "Sorry, honey. Raina needed us more. You understand?" I sat in my Civic afterward, diploma in the trunk, just watching the parking lot clear out. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel shocked. I think that's what hit the hardest. It felt exactly like what I expected. A week later, I drove home to sagging balloons and leftover confetti stuck in the carpet. Raina was center stage in the living room, showing off her ring like it was a crown jewel. Mom gave me a sideways hug and said, "Your graduation was just one of many, baby. Raina's engagement, that's once in a lifetime." That was the day I quietly lowered my expectations of my parents. What I didn't know, even that version of the story, who showed up, who didn't, wasn't the whole truth. I went to my room, dropped my keys on the dresser, and peeled the crushed ribbon off one of Raina's old party balloons still taped to my door. The morning after I peeled that balloon off my bedroom door, I packed up my car, drove back to Charlotte, and accepted the first real offer I had on the table. Credit analyst, entry-level, regional bank downtown. Not glamorous, not life-changing, but it came with a salary and a badge. And it was 4 hours from Ridgemont, which felt like just enough distance to breathe without guilt in every inhale. I worked days at the bank, then clocked in overnight at a supermarket off Independence Boulevard 3 nights a week stocking shelves. My dinner came from gas stations, and I lived off those bargain-sized coffees that tasted like burnt rubber but kept me upright. I told myself it was just temporary hustle, a year or 2, tops. I just needed to get stable. My first apartment sat behind a tire shop and had linoleum peeling at the corners and walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's toilet flush. But when I unlocked that door and stepped inside, every single thing in there was paid for by me. That mattered more than where it was or how it looked. Nobody could toss my things in the trash because they weren't shiny enough. Nobody could decide if what I did was fridge-worthy. I didn't hear much from home that first year. Group texts on holidays, the occasional forwarded photo of Raina's latest hairstyle or the girls' birthday cakes. That silence felt better than I expected. I wasn't the forgotten kid anymore. I was the one who didn't have to keep pretending to care about being remembered. Then one Tuesday night, almost a year in, my phone buzzed. "Mom," it said. I stared at it for a second before answering. Her voice was soft, like someone calling from a church pew. "Hey, sweetheart, I didn't want to bother you, but the mortgage, well, it jumped again. You know how these banks are, and your dad's back. He's been having a hard time getting around the shop. We're just really stretched thin right now." I already felt it coming before she asked. My head went straight to the math, my rent, my car, groceries, the tiny bit I'd managed to save. She didn't know those numbers, she just said it. "Could you send maybe $1,200 a month? Just until we get back on our feet. Nothing permanent. You've always been the strong one, Bram." I opened my banking app that night and set up a recurring transfer, labeled it Parents. House. First payment went out on the 15th. I watched it clear like I watched any other bill, except this one made my chest tight. I felt proud. I felt sick. I didn't say no. At the bank, I spent my days evaluating debt-to-income ratios, declining loan applications when things didn't add up. I once told a man he needed to stop supporting his brother if he wanted to qualify for a mortgage. I didn't apply that logic at home. Never once asked to see the actual mortgage statement. Never asked for proof. My manager called me tough but fair in our year-end review. I laughed, nodded, said, "That's the job," knowing I'd never been tough with anyone who shared my last name. That first transfer? It turned into dozens, then hundreds. Like a second rent for a house I didn't live in. I kept telling myself it was what a good son does. And every month, right on the 15th, that money left my account without a fight. By the time I hit 25, I was living in a one-bedroom condo near uptown Charlotte, finally somewhere that didn't smell like burned toast and mildew. I had a solid raise under my belt, was down to one job, and no longer felt like a busted tire or a missed paycheck would take me out. It was the first time I felt like I had a little air between me and panic. I met Marin at a friend's cookout in Matthews early spring, one of those afternoons where people sit around mismatched lawn chairs pretending to like IPAs. She had a dry wit and zero small talk, said she was a CPA who actually enjoys ugly spreadsheets, and that alone got my attention. We talked for maybe 20 minutes before I realized I hadn't mentioned Raina or Ridgemont once. It felt good to just exist without the baggage. We started with casual coffee runs, then dinners, then she was leaving a toothbrush at my place, and we were moving her spare charger into the nightstand drawer. Slowly, we were blending lives. She'd fold my laundry like it was a reflex, and I'd pick up her favorite oat milk without her asking. It was real. It was good. But she started to notice things, like how every unknown number that popped up on my phone made my shoulders lock, how my face changed every time I saw Mom flash on the screen. The big ask came on a Thursday night. I was making pasta when Mom called, sounding breathless. "Your dad's truck finally gave out. Transmission's shot. He can't get to work." We found a decent used SUV, low mileage, and the dealer said we could swing it with a cosigner. I didn't say anything right away. She jumped in fast. "It's just your signature, honey. I'll handle every payment. You know I've never let you down." Then she added, like she'd rehearsed it, "He's been limping around the yard all week. I'm worried, Bram." Next day I walked into a branch on Trade Street, sat down across from a woman who pulled up my credit, smiled, and slid the co-borrower agreement across the desk. I signed. My hand hesitated just long enough for me to feel the twist in my stomach. That truck was tied to me now. For almost 2 years, payments landed like clockwork. No late notices, no drama. I convinced myself she meant what she said, that maybe this was one of those rare times something just worked. Marin and I had started budgeting together by then. One night she pointed at the $1,200 transfer and the co-signed loan, then looked at me across the spreadsheet. "You're carrying a lot for people who don't live here," she said. I laughed. "Welcome to my family." At the bank, a younger analyst asked me if he should help his parents with a personal loan. I didn't even blink. I said, "Family first." It rolled out so smooth I didn't hear myself. Didn't question where I'd heard it 100 times before. Then the email came in. Payment overdue, 14 days past due. My gut went cold. I called Mom that night. She answered like nothing was wrong. "Oh, that? Just a mix-up with the bank draft. I'll sort it out tomorrow. Don't stress the small stuff, baby." I hung up, staring at the screen, knowing full well this wasn't small stuff. Not when it was tied to my name. I sat at my kitchen table with the late payment email still open on my laptop, the glow of the screen bouncing off the dark window behind it. Marin leaned over my shoulder, reading the notice quietly. She didn't rush me, didn't lecture, just studied the numbers like she would any spreadsheet. Then she asked, calm as anything, "How many times has this happened and you just paid it?" I rubbed my face and shrugged, pretending to think. Truth was, I already knew the answer wasn't clean. Sometimes a payment would be a few days off, and I'd move money around just to make sure it cleared. I had always told myself it was temporary, that things were tight back home, and I was just smoothing the bumps. "Not many," I said. "Maybe once or twice." She didn't argue. She just nodded slowly and closed the laptop. 2 months later, another notice landed in my inbox. This one said the loan was 19 days past due. My stomach dropped the second I saw the alert from the credit bureau showing my score had dipped a few points. It wasn't a huge drop, but it was the first time in years my credit had taken a hit. That shook me. That night, Marin and I stood in the kitchen with a dry erase marker and the little whiteboard we used for groceries and bills. I started saying the numbers out loud while she wrote them down. 6 years of $1,200 a month, I said slowly, plus the car loan tied to my name, plus the mortgage pre-approval I'm working on right now. The total stacked up fast. Hearing it out loud felt different from seeing it trickle out of my account every month. Marin grabbed her phone and said, "What's your parents' address again?" "Hanson Lane," I said. She pulled up a property listing site and typed it in. The house popped up immediately. A plain little ranch built in the late 1990s, same beige siding I remembered, same 2-car driveway. She turned the phone toward me. "This place should be almost paid off by now," she said. Around that same time, Mom started slipping new stories into our phone calls. Little comments about Raina and Nolan struggling with their own mortgage. Nolan had lost his mortgage broker job, she said. Things were tight over there too. Then she'd add something like, "Once we stabilize the house here, maybe you could help them catch up a little." That word, stabilize, started sounding strange. One night, Marin and I filled the whiteboard with rough math. We guessed what the mortgage payment on that house probably was based on the purchase price and how long they'd owned it. Even with conservative numbers, the monthly help I was sending already looked bigger than what the payment likely should have been. I stared at that board for a long time before picking up my phone. I called Mom in the middle of the day while I was sitting at my desk at the bank. "Hey, sweetheart," she answered. I didn't warm up the conversation. "What's the current balance on the mortgage?" I asked. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough to feel it. Then her voice turned sharp. "Why would you ask me something like that? I'm just trying to understand the numbers." "Oh, I see," she said coldly. "You've been talking to other people about our finances now?" "I didn't say that." "Well, maybe remember whose name is on that SUV loan before you start interrogating me." She never gave me the number. I hung up and called Dad right away. His phone rang 3 times and dropped a voicemail. I called again. Same result. On the 3rd try, I left a message. "Hey Dad, it's Bram. I just want to talk man to man about the house. Give me a call when you get a minute." He never called back. That night I lay in bed next to Marin, staring up at the ceiling fan, spinning slowly in the dark. At the bank, I spent every day telling clients the same rule. Know where every dollar goes. Lying there, I realized I didn't know where mine had gone. And for the first time, a word slipped into my head that I had never connected to my own mother before. Leverage. Saturday morning, I was still in sweatpants, scrolling nothing on my phone, when Marin came into the living room, balancing her laptop on one arm and 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were locked in. "I pulled the county records on your parents' place," she said. "Sit down for this." I set my phone face down on the coffee table. She sat next to me and flipped the laptop around. On the screen was a scanned deed for the house on Hanson Lane. My parents' names sat right at the top, clear as day, next to the words, "Mortgage satisfied." Below that, the payoff date was circled. It was months before the first time Mom had ever called me about the mortgage, months before the first transfer. I couldn't speak right away. My chest felt tight like someone had taken a clamp to it and started turning. We did the math, simple and brutal. Over 70 transfers, $1,200 each. That was more than enough for a solid down payment on a house in Charlotte, maybe even 2 if I hadn't already bought the penthouse. I didn't scream, I didn't punch the wall. I stood up, laced my shoes, and ran. No music, no watch. I just pushed myself around the block until my legs burned, lungs on fire, and I couldn't see straight. When I came back in, dripping sweat, Marin had the printer going. She laid everything out on the dining table. Bank statements from the last 6 years, neatly highlighted, and the printed deed with a short timeline summary stapled to it. I sat down, my shirt still clung to my back, and I stared at the stack for a long time before I finally said the words out loud. "My mom has been asking for money for a mortgage that doesn't exist." That changed everything. A few days later, I got a call from my Uncle Royce. I was eating lunch at my desk, watching the news on mute. When the phone buzzed, he never called. His voice came through low and rough, like he was driving. "Hey, Bram, you got a minute?" "Yeah," I said, setting my fork down. "I've been hearing some strange versions of your life from Marla lately," he said. "Just wanted to check if everything's okay." I leaned back. "Depends what version you got." He gave me a bitter chuckle. She told my wife you moved to Charlotte and cut everybody off. Said you refused to help when Dale had that kidney scare. Then, last week, she asked if I could loan her $5,000 for Raina's emergency. Wouldn't say what it was. My jaw tightened. There was no kidney thing, and I've been sending her money for 6 years. There was a pause on the line. Wind through the window. Road noise. Thought so, Roy said. Thing is, your dad told me last summer the house was finally paid off. He said it like a brag, like something he was proud of. And Mom's still using the word mortgage, I said. She is, he said. I called her out on it 2 days ago. She hung up. That silence between us stretched again, and I thought that was it. But right before we ended the call, Royce added something that stuck in my brain like a nail. Look, Bram, there's something you don't know about your graduation day. I ain't unpacking it over the phone, but be ready when it comes up. I asked what he meant, but he just said, you'll understand soon. We hung up, and I sat there in my office chair, staring down at the manila folder I'd started filling with the deed, the transfer history, the printed loan documents, and the late notices. I'd spent 6 years thinking I was helping my parents stay afloat. Turns out, I was the only one in the family who didn't know the story Mom had been telling about me. That night, I sat at the kitchen counter, printer humming behind me, a red pen in one hand and 6 years of bank statements laid out in a staggered mess across the granite. I circled every single line that said Marla or Hanson Lane, page after page. It felt like I was building a crime scene timeline, except the crime was just believing. That stack became my 20s, wiped clean into columns and totals. During my lunch break the next day, I stepped into a phone booth in the parking garage and called the auto lender. I told them I wanted to refinance the SUV loan fully into my name. The rep ran the numbers, verified my income, and sent the new documents through. That evening, an email hit my inbox. Co-borrower removed. Just like that, Mom had one less string to tug. I opened a clean Word doc and typed out a single-page timeline. Nothing dramatic, just facts. Dates of transfers, notes on phone calls, the mortgage payoff date pulled from the deed record. I triple-checked the format, printed it, and added it to the stack, along with the deed, the SUV refinance letter, and my signed bank statements. Then I went digging through an old box labeled college stuff. In the bottom corner was the original graduation invitation I'd mailed to Ridgemont 7 years earlier. Cream cardstock, navy blue lettering, and my handwriting along the bottom edge. Row 3, seats 7 and 8, saved for you. I held it for a second, then slipped it into the manila envelope with the rest. I wasn't building some courtroom case or prepping for a showdown. I just needed the truth in one place, a file I could touch and open when the gaslighting got loud, proof that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. That Sunday evening, I stepped out onto my balcony with a fresh mug of coffee. The Charlotte skyline was glowing pink and gold behind the glass towers, and the air had that quiet end-of-weekend calm. I snapped a photo, mug on the railing, skyline in the back, and captioned it, "Finally feels like home." Posted it to Instagram without thinking twice. An hour later, my phone lit up. Coworkers liked it. Friends dropped fire emojis, and then came the text from Mom. "So proud of you, my boy. Look at what you built. You've always had a spark in you." Followed by another one. "Any chance you're free to come down this weekend? Just a small family dinner. Some folks would love to see what you've been up to." I read it twice, then showed the screen to Marin as we sat on the couch. She raised one eyebrow, tilted her head. Funny how pride shows up right after square footage. I half laughed, half grunted. "You think I should go?" She set her tea down. "Are you actually ready to go back?" I didn't answer right away. My hand was already reaching for the envelope on the counter. I'd spent years letting other people tell versions of my story, quiet versions, skewed ones, versions where I was selfish or missing or cold. But this envelope was the real version, and Royce's warning had been sitting in my head like a live wire ever since that call. I typed back to Mom. "I'll be there Saturday, not to play hero, not to save anybody. I just wanted to speak for myself, for once." Saturday morning, Marin and I packed the car. I slid the manila envelope under an old sweatshirt on the back seat and shut the door. As we merged onto the highway toward Ridgemont, I looked out the window and said, I knew this wasn't just about casseroles and catching up. We turned onto Hanson Lane just before 6, and I knew before we even reached the driveway that the whole thing was a setup. Cars lined both ditches, at least 15, maybe more. SUVs, minivans, a couple old sedans I vaguely recognized. So much for a small family dinner. I parked across the street, heart pounding steady but tight. Marin looked at me without saying anything. I nodded once. Let's go. The second we stepped inside, the heat and noise hit me like a wave. The living room and kitchen were packed wall to wall with folding chairs, crock pots, people holding paper plates, neighbors from church, cousins I hadn't seen in years. Over the fireplace in big glittery letters hung a homemade banner that read, "Family First." Mom spotted me instantly. She came rushing through the crowd in a floral dress that smelled like drugstore perfume and forced nostalgia. Tears welled up in her eyes as she grabbed me in a tight hug. "My boy came home," she said loud enough for half the room to hear. Like I'd returned from overseas combat instead of driving 4 hours down East 77. I pulled back gently. "Hey, Mom." Dad was off in the kitchen doorway, drying a glass over and over like he was hoping it would disappear in his hands. He didn't look up. Raina sat near the far end of the long table, Nolan beside her in some button-down that looked borrowed. Their daughters, Maisie and Ivy, were weaving through adults with little plastic cups of punch, giggling like they didn't feel the tension in the air. The food was good. Ham, green beans, sweet potatoes, a dozen casseroles. Conversation stayed surface level at first. Football, gas prices, someone asking me how bank stuff worked. It almost felt normal, like maybe I'd made too much of it all. Then dessert came out, and everything changed. Mom tapped her fork gently against a mason jar. "Everyone," she said, standing near the head of the table. "Can we pause for a second?" People quieted down. I felt Marin shift slightly beside me. She didn't speak, but her eyes were locked on Mom. "I just want to say how proud I am of this one," Mom said, motioning toward me like I was a statue being unveiled. "Bram's doing so well up there in Charlotte. That view from his penthouse." She laughed lightly. I always knew he was destined for big things. There were nods, a few soft claps. Then she pivoted. "Raina and Nolan, as you all know, have fallen on some hard times with their mortgage," she continued, her tone dipping like it was about to get sentimental. "But we're a family that sticks together. And Bram, being the kind of son he is, already offered to help them catch up, maybe even roll some of their debts into something more manageable with his bank connections." I didn't speak. The silence hit hard. Heads turned toward me. Aunt Eileen gave Raina's hand a little pat. Uncle Clint leaned forward and said, "A real man takes care of his folks." Then I felt it. Mom's hand resting on my shoulder, soft but deliberate. Her voice lowered. "Honey, you want to say a few words?" She expected the nod, the smile, the verbal signature on a blank check. I stood up instead. I reached down, slid my bag closer, unzipped it, and pulled out the manila envelope. "Before we talk about more help," I said clearly, "I need to clear something up." The room went still. I opened the envelope and took out the timeline first. "For the past 6 years," I said, "I've been sending $1,200 a month to my parents. It was supposed to be for the mortgage on this house." I handed the first paper to Uncle Royce, who was sitting 2 seats away. "This is a county record showing the mortgage was paid off months before those payments started." Gasps, whispers. I passed the timeline around. Dates, notes, transfer records. People scanned each page like they weren't sure what they were seeing. I looked at Mom. "You told me you needed help to save this house." But there was no house to save. She didn't speak. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Then from the far end of the table, my cousin Jory stood up, voice hesitant but firm. "I have something to add," she said. "I work in the clerk's office, and I saw a judgment a few months ago tied to a credit line in Raina's name." All eyes shifted. The payments on it were coming from one of Aunt Marla's accounts, always a day or two after Bram's transfers landed. The line was labeled for brand shoots and appearance costs. Raina froze. Nolan's face went red. The room fell silent again, but not confused this time. Ashamed, and I just stood there, envelope in hand, as the air sucked itself out of the room. When Jory said the word judgment, the room went still in a way I've never felt before. Not awkward, not confused, just silent, like sound had dropped out of the air completely. I could hear the ice settling in the sweet tea. I looked over and saw Raina staring down at the table like she was trying to solve an equation she didn't remember writing. Jory cleared her throat and kept going. From what I saw in the clerk's file, she said, a lot of that so-called mortgage help went straight into Raina's name. Charges tied to brand shoots, wardrobe rentals, venue balances, stuff that propped up her online image while the family thought Bram had gone selfish. There were murmurs. Someone dropped a fork. Mom let out a short, shaky laugh. That's not, well, it's complicated. Sweetheart, sometimes families share resources. We don't always label things the same way, but her voice trembled. It didn't sound like her usual spin. It sounded like someone realizing they were out of rehearsed lines. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the small index card I'd written the night before. I knew myself too well. I knew if I spoke from memory, I'd soften it, so I read straight from the card. As of this week, all monthly transfers are canceled. The auto loan has been refinanced into my name. Mom's no longer attached to that debt. And from this point on, I won't be funding anyone's side projects, influencer shoots, or hidden emergencies. I looked straight at her. I'm done being the son who supposedly left this family while quietly underwriting the lies no one wanted to say out loud. There's no bailout coming for Raina and Nolan. Aunt Eileen didn't say a word, but she gave a slow, subtle nod. Across the room, Mrs. Keller folded her hands and sat back in her chair, just watching. Uncle Clint, who'd been preaching family duty all night, suddenly found his plate fascinating. Mom tried to jump back in. I know it looks bad, but I did what I had to do. I made sacrifices, Bram. Everything I did was for... That's when Royce stood up. There's something else y'all need to hear, he said. Everyone turned. Even Dad finally looked up. 7 years ago, I loaned Dale my truck so he could drive to Bram's college graduation. He called me from the arena, said he was proud, said he got a good seat. Royce paused. Halfway through the ceremony, Marla called him, said Raina collapsed at her engagement party, said he had to come home right then. I felt something sink in my stomach. But we found out later she never fainted. Party went on just fine. That call was never about saving anybody. It was about pulling Dale out of Bram's day. I looked at Dad, still holding the same glass. His shoulders slumped as he finally met my eyes. His voice cracked. I should have stayed. Bram, that's on me. I won't pretend it isn't. No excuse, no dodge, just truth. Then Jory, her voice shaking now, spoke again. A few months back, I processed Nolan's DUI paperwork. Bail was posted in cash by Aunt Marla. Raina's name never showed up anywhere in the file. Raina turned sharply toward Mom. You knew and didn't tell me? Nolan didn't say a word, just stood up, slipped out the front door like he'd rehearsed it. A couple of the church neighbors gathered their coats. Mrs. Keller walked past me and whispered, You did right, son, before heading out. Dad didn't follow Mom. He left with Royce. The family first banner hung crooked above a table full of cold cobbler, wrinkled papers, and a woman with no script left to read from. I crashed on Royce and Eileen's pull-out couch that night. Didn't even take off my jeans. Marin stayed at a hotel in town. Both of us agreed we needed space after everything that dropped. I woke up to the smell of bacon and the soft, rhythmic banging of my uncle hammering something in the garage like it was any other Sunday. I shuffled out onto the front steps with a chipped mug full of black coffee and sat down, squinting at the pale morning light. My back ached from the couch springs, but I didn't care. I just needed air. Dad showed up 20 minutes later, walking slow up the driveway holding a gas station cup, and looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His ball cap was stained, and the way he moved made it clear sleep hadn't been part of his night either. He sat down beside me without a word for a minute. Then he said, I don't expect forgiveness. I didn't answer. I knew. Some of the money coming in was more than needed, he admitted. But it was easier to not ask questions than start a fight with your mom. I turned to look at him. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You let this go on too long. He nodded. I know. I took a sip of coffee, then said, If you want a relationship with me, it's gotta be real. That means no middlemen, no pretending. You call me. Tuesday nights, just you. Deal, he said. Tuesday nights. Raina pulled up a little after 9. She looked like she hadn't slept either. No makeup, hair pulled into a bun, bags under her eyes. She didn't come with drama this time, just walked up and asked quietly, Did you know about the DUI bail? The credit line? I shook my head. I found out at that table. Same as you. She let out a long breath and looked down at the gravel. She told me you begged to help. Told me you said I deserved it. She told me you were fragile and needed to shine. That you'd fall apart if I said no. Her eyes darted toward the car where Maisie and Ivy were in the back seat coloring. She didn't say anything for a second. I don't hate you, Raina, I said, but I'm done carrying your bills. Or your denial. Sit down with your own statements, the way Marin and I did with mine. Before we left town, Aunt Eileen pulled me into the garage and handed me a dusty envelope they'd found tucked in a drawer under some car manuals. It was addressed to me in Dad's handwriting, postmarked 7 years ago. Inside was a check for $100 and a short letter. Bram, sorry we missed it. I'm proud of you. You earned that walk. We'll talk soon. Love, Dad. She never mailed it. I read it in the passenger seat while Marin drove us back toward Charlotte. Angry, relieved, a weird mix of both. That week, Mom posted a long message in the family group chat about how I ambushed her and turned everyone against her. Then Royce, Eileen, and Jory calmly dropped the deed photo and my timeline, one by one. Reactions shifted. Quiet messages started coming my way. I didn't engage. I went for long runs, clocked in at work, and sat on the balcony with Marin talking about how many people probably lived in the same kind of trap. By Friday, I cracked open a fresh notebook and wrote across the first page in bold, "Financial boundaries, with family." Then I underlined it twice. By the time I sat down to tell this story into a camera, months had passed. The automatic $1,200 transfer was gone, shut down for good. That money now hit my savings account instead of vanishing into a hole labeled family obligation. Dad called me on Tuesday nights like we agreed. Sometimes we talked about brake pads, sometimes about the Hornets. He wasn't poetic, but the calls came, and those short, awkward check-ins meant more than any teary apology ever could have. I heard from Jory that he started going to the Main Street diner by himself, grabbing a booth or sitting at the counter, talking with the regulars. It wasn't dramatic, but for him, that was rebellion, doing something without Mom's permission. Raina texted me a few weeks after that dinner. She said she'd filed for divorce. Nolan had buried nearly $50,000 in gambling debt, hidden in shell accounts. The DUI had just been the first one that spilled into daylight. She said she'd started therapy. Not some magic fix, but a real beginning. I didn't make it emotional. I texted back, "Glad you're getting help, nothing more." We weren't kids anymore. There was no reset button, but I didn't hate her. Mom tried to reframe the story, of course. She posted in the family group chat, hinted on Facebook that I'd let money change me, that I'd turn my back on where I came from. But every time she started spinning, someone from that dinner, Royce, Eileen, Jory, would calmly drop a screenshot, a photo, a record. Eventually, the post just stopped. I never blocked her. But I stopped replying to messages that started with, "I did what I thought was best," instead of "I lied, and it hurt you." She doesn't have to agree with my boundaries. They still exist. At work, people started sending me clients stuck in similar knots. Co-signed loans gone bad. Family members freeloading on guilt. I'd sit across from them and say, "You're allowed to know where your money goes. You're allowed to say no." That led to a YouTube channel. Just me, my laptop, and a mic. Plain talk videos about red flags and family money talk. Scripts for saying no without screaming. And this story as the first long one. I framed my Midland State diplomas in my home office, hung it beside the graduation invite with the empty seats and the letter Dad never mailed, not as trophies, as reminders that I stopped letting other people decide what those things meant. I don't have some Hallmark ending, no group hug, no perfect Christmas card, but I've got my own mortgage, my own rules. A girlfriend who reads spreadsheets like mystery novels and still loves me, and a dad who calls. So, if you're listening and you're sending money every month with no straight answers, if they call you selfish for asking where it goes, you're not crazy. You're not ungrateful. Your name belongs to you, not to the loudest person telling your story. Before you go, share your own boundary story in the comments if you want. And hit subscribe, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do for your family is protect your future instead of sacrificing your stability so everyone else can stay comfortable. Quick thing I want to ask you. Are you ready to set one real boundary this week? Tap hype to boost this, subscribe, and like to support. Then drop a comment with your thoughts or even just good story.